This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Today on the show, I have Yaron Brook. Yaron is the president and executive director of the Ayn Rand Institute. For those of you that appreciate Ayn Rand and her work, you will enjoy this conversation quite a bit, I'm sure. For those of you that are not familiar with Ayn Rand, but have an open mind, I'm sure you will enjoy this conversation as well, and you'll probably learn some new points of view that I really appreciate. For those of you that hate Ayn Rand, despise Ayn Rand, but perhaps like what I do, will you at least give me the benefit of the doubt and listen to my conversation with Yaron? And if you don't like my conversation with Yaron, can you at least do me the consideration of sending me an email and explaining to me exactly what it is that you disagree with? Because I truly want to understand your disagreement. I hope you enjoy my conversation today with Yaron Brook. Let me jump right in. The idea of a trader, I think it's one of the most important concepts. And you know where I'm going with this, but it's a concept, the idea of trading, a trader, and it's so reviled in history. It's the masses get conditioned to think this is not a good thing, but trading amongst honest men, that's where it all starts.
Yeah, I mean, trading is, I think, the foundation of all human relations, really. It is about providing value to one another and receiving value in return for that value. And you know, fundamentally, this is true both for material values that we trade, and we use money as kind of as a means of exchange. But really, what we're trading is labor for goods or goods for goods. We're basically all bartering, trading one's some value for another value. But this is also true in the spiritual realm. Relationships of friendship, of love. All of those are relationship fundamentally of trading of values for values. Those values might be material, they might be monetary, or they might be spiritual and values of consciousness.
How did we get to the point where it became such a reviled thought, a concept? How has that process moved forward where it's not generally respected by the masses?
Well, I think it's not respected because, there's a number of reasons. If you think about it historically, going back, a long time, people perceived the world as a zero-sum game. There was very much the notion that my gain was your loss, and there was no economic or philosophical understanding of the fact of the win-win nature of trade, that in a trade, I give up something, but I get something of higher value to me in exchange. So if I buy an iPhone for $300, it's worth more than $300 to me. And indeed to Apple, it's worth less than $300. They're making a profit on it. So it's a kind of a win-win relationship. So I think for a long time in primitive societies, there was this lack of understanding of the nature of trade. And even though looking back, it seemed kind of obvious that, trading a weapon for a piece of meat, both parties kind of benefit from it. That requires some conceptual thought, some abstract thoughts, some philosophical thoughts. And I think that humanity lacked that knowledge. So that the accumulation of goods by one party was always perceived as that accumulation was the expense of others. And I think that perception that really had, really stayed with humanity until the development kind of modern thinking. Somewhat in Greece you get it, but much more, I think it happens in the Enlightenment, where people suddenly understand, trading is this mutually beneficial thing, and everybody's better off, and markets are good as a consequence. That is a relatively modern development, and it really hasn't filtered into the culture. Now, if you add to that, the idea, I think, developed when we were tribal, and later kind of solidified under Christianity and among secular philosophers, that the individual's life was not important. That what was important, morally important, was ultimately the tribe, the faith, the community, somebody else, the leader, the witch doctor, whatever. And that the purpose of life was to sacrifice for this greater cause, for this, for this something bigger than oneself. And this is the morality of altruism, the morality of otherism, the placing of the well-being of others above your own well-being. And that has become kind of the standard moral code in Western civilization for the last 2,000 years. Sacrifice is noble. Selflessness is noble. And pursuing one's own self-interest, for example, through trading, is perceived as low, demeaning, materialistic, and ultimately immoral. And I think that is the real demonization. The demonization is the demonization of self-interest. And trading is self-interested, markets are self-interested, and as a consequence, trading and markets are being demonized.
So one of the criticisms that when people start to dig into objectivism and they hear the phrase selfishness. And so here you're explaining trading where there can be a win-win, but then they hear the term selfish. Talk about the idea of selfishness.
So we've been trained to believe that selfish means exploiting others, taking advantage of others. It means lying, stealing, cheating, doing whatever one can in order to take advantage of a situation, to take advantage, to get what you want. But that is kind of a relatively, I think, modern notion. That is this notion, again, that derives from the moral, the good, the noble is taking care of others. So those who want you to believe that have created the straw man of the selfish human being that exploits other people. But that's not what selfish means. Selfish really means taking care of self. And when one really considers what it means to take care of oneself, to pursue one's own self-interest, to do what's good for you, then exploiting others is not in your self-interest. It's not in your self-interest to lie, steal, and cheat. There is no morality of lying, stealing, cheating. There is no moral code of exploitation of others. Selfishness actually means those virtues and values that one needs to pursue in order to live a good life, in order to actually pursue one's own self-interest, one's own life, one's own good. Not at the expense of others, but through the trading mechanisms, through this win-win mechanism. So the altruists, the morality of altruism has created this false dichotomy. You can either be selfless, sacrificing, altruistic, and that's good and that's noble and or you can be, a louse. You can be a lying, stealing, cheating, selfish person. And what Ayn Rand says is, wait a minute, that's a false dichotomy. There's not just two things here. There's a third option. And that third option is true selfishness, is rational selfishness, is long-term selfishness. And she wants to recapture the term selfishness. And she says the third option is to be a rational, long-term thinker who pursues the values that will truly make him happy, successful, and good, neither sacrificing himself to others nor sacrificing others to himself. And that is what true morality is about. That is what true goodness is about. But you see, that is Ayn Rand's innovation. Now she follows the Greeks who believed that selfishness or self-interest were virtues, and had, Aristotle, who had a whole moral code around achieving happiness and achieving success as a human being, flourishing. But in modern times, certainly since Aristotle, Ayn Rand is the first philosopher to really articulate a philosophy of self-interest, a morality of self-interest, where one's relationship to others is based on the principle of justice and trade. Relationships are centered around win-win transactions, win-win relationships.
You bring up Ayn Rand. In my life, I still remember, and I might have mentioned this on the Harry Benswanger interview, but I was first exposed, very, very successful trader, and we were talking business, and he said, "We're not talking anymore, Mike, until you read Atlas Shrugged." And when I read it, I remember thinking to myself, this might not be exactly how I would write it. Maybe this isn't exactly how I would describe things. But the big picture philosophy, what she was saying, what she was talking about government and control, and this idea of the big bureaucracy looking to control everybody, in modern terms, the matrix, so to speak, just resonated. And I find today that some of the best traders, the most successful entrepreneurs, the best business people, they might not talk about it publicly, but behind the scenes, they have no problem saying Fountainhead, Atlas Shrugged. Now, on the flip side, I find that there's many individuals, often with not a lot of success in their life, and they look at an old video of Ayn Rand, and maybe they criticize her appearance, maybe they criticize her smoking, some black and white video, and they entirely miss the point. And maybe they don't miss the point. Maybe that is the point. Maybe they know exactly what she's saying, and they just don't want to admit it.
Well, to some extent, they can't afford to admit it. I think what really resonates, with most people in Atlas Shrugged, the politics are important and the world around us and the role of government and kind of, as you say, the matrix. But much more important than that, I believe, is that Atlas and the Fountainhead are books that basically reaffirm the principle that your life is yours, that your life is yours to live as you see fit, that it's your happiness what is important, and you have a moral right to pursue your happiness and to pursue your flourishing and to pursue values that are necessary for that, and that nobody has a right to tell you how to live. Or indeed to force you how to live. And that government regulations and government redistribution of wealth are just a manifestation of a morality that is trying to dictate to you, what your life should be. In a sense, what government today is telling you is that your life doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the poor. It belongs to the uninsured. It belongs to whoever Obama or whoever Bush or whoever the latest politicians decide your life belongs to. And what Atlas says it reaffirms is no, my life is mine. And Ayn Rand provides the full philosophical framework for understanding why that is, that life is yours and to live, to flourish, to be successful. And I think that, I think traders, that resonates with traders. And I think, of course, trading, at least historically, not so much maybe today, was one of the freest activities, particularly financial trading was one of the freest activities, the least regulated activities, particularly if you were in a hedge fund and so on. Now, again, that's changing, but it used to be so. And therefore, I think a lot of these kind of independent-minded individuals who sought to make the most of their own lives, who sought to pursue their own happiness, gravitated to those areas where government was minimal and where they could express themselves the best way that they could and really use their mind to pursue success. So, I think that the book resonates with successful people. It not only that, the books have in them, I think, the formulas for success. The books talk about reason is crucial for one's ability to function. It talks about productivity and being productive and the virtue of productivity and building and creating stuff and the importance of honesty and integrity and having pride in one's own work and own success. So all of that is kind of part of Atlas Shrugged and part of the books. And I think what happens is that people that don't have self-esteem, that don't have confidence, that don't have the kind of a backbone, they read Atlas Shrugged and it's intimidating for them because basically Atlas Shrugged tells them you can't be dependent on other people. Your moral responsibility is to you. You have to make them out. You are responsible for your own life. You shouldn't sacrifice for other people, but neither should other people sacrifice for you. And I think you get two types of people who resent Atlas Shrugged. Those people who are being trained and who feel comfortable living for other people, that they gain value, purpose from other people. Purpose doesn't come from inside them. It's not, they don't know what their values are. They're not connected to their own soul, if you will, to their own being. And you get people who are powerlusters, who want other people to sacrifice for them. These are kind of your standard politicians who want to lie, steal, and cheat and want everybody else to admire them and give them. And they don't want to produce. They don't want to create. They don't want to use their own mind in order to achieve success and happiness. They want to basically steal it from other people. And these are the powerlusters, and they gravitate towards fields like politics where they can get away with it. I think there's a lot of psychological elements in how you respond to Atlas Shrugged. I think the book requires a certain independence and a certain self-esteem that I think those who reject it or don't or claim not to understand it or don't understand it, legitimately don't understand it. And they don't understand it because they're psychologically so fundamentally opposed to it, psychologically and philosophically.
I think it does help. It helps to have some experiences of entrepreneurial success. It helps to see behind the scenes at how the bureaucracy or the government implements policy, which is often unfair to the benefit of insiders. And I think when you have that aha moment, if you're lucky enough to have existed in this world to have that aha moment, it helps to understand Atlas and you just go, bingo, right on, spot on.
I think that's right, but it's not enough. I was just in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, and you've got a lot of successful entrepreneurs there who are so inculcated with bad philosophy that in spite of them knowing the disaster that is the bureaucracy in his government, in spite of them having incredible success in their own life and achieving much in their own life, they're still antagonistic to the idea of freedom. They're still antagonistic to the idea of individual success, and they still buy into all the nonsense. So fundamentally, the issue is philosophical. Fundamentally, the issue is what are the ideas that you believe in? And, it's hard to change people's ideas. And, I think Atlas Shrugged does an amazing job at changing people, but people have to be willing to change. And many people who read the book are not willing to change. They bought into the ideas that their teachers, that their preachers, that their parents, that their philosophers, that they, university professors have taught them. And they're not willing to let those ideas be challenged by a book or by other people or by logic and reality. And they just buy into it. And it amazes me how many people who should know better support government programs that are disasters, support politicians that are only doing harm, and support a philosophy that is clearly dangerous and damaging to human beings. And again, they should know better. But that is the power of ideas. They have this ability to corrupt everything about you, and it's very hard to dislodge them once you've adopted them.
Selling victimhood. It's this idea of being a victim. I mean, if we were all just little kids out in the sandbox and we didn't have somebody to come take care of us, but the idea of being a victim somehow or another in a perverse sort of way has become sexy. It's fundamentally nuts to me. I don't know. There's no freedom associated with being a victim. It's pathetic. And it's almost like there's a certain segment of the population that knows this victimhood stuff is nonsense. And it's just not said loud enough. Like when someone starts up with the victim stuff, I just want to shake them and say, come on, you're just absolutely full of it. You have no clue what you're doing. And you're probably never going to have any success in your life. Excuse my rant, but this victimhood thing is driving me crazy, Yaron.
No, I think that's right. But this is the consequence of where we are today. We don't teach our kids that achievement is a consequence of, not just hard work, but heavy thinking. Indeed, we don't teach our kids to think at all. Our schools teach them to socialize and to emote and to envy and to and not to think, not to use your mind. And then we tell them politically, don't worry, be happy. We'll take care of you. It's your responsibility to take care of your parents and grandparents. We're going to tax you to death in order to do that. But don't worry, when you become sick and when you become old, we'll take care of you, even though if you look at the numbers, we're clearly lying to them, but we're telling our young people this. And we've created a mentality of dependency, a mentality of entitlement. And that the whole idea of entitlement has to lead to victimhood, because if you're entitled to a certain standard of living and you're not getting it, then you must be a victim. If you're never told that it's your responsibility to get whatever you get in life, that it's your life, that, if you're going to achieve, you have to achieve. Nobody owes you anything. You're not entitled to anything. You're not entitled to healthcare. You're not entitled to money. You're not entitled to a job. You're not entitled to education. You're not entitled to anything, which is the truth and reality. If you're told the opposite, that you're entitled to all these things, and then it doesn't work out, you don't have a job, you don't have this, then you're a victim. Then you fall right into this issue of victimhood. So what we need to do to reverse this is to change our whole approach to education, change our whole approach to people. What we need is an approach that says, no, it's your responsibility to achieve whatever you achieve in life. Nobody owes you anything. You're an individual and your life is yours. Nobody owns you, but you don't own anybody else. You don't have a claim on anybody's money. Just because somebody's rich doesn't mean this stuff is yours. You don't have a claim on anything. You want to be rich? Go work hard and achieve it. And here, by the way, are the tools to do it. Learn some math, learn how to read and write, and most importantly, learn how to think and use your brain, be rational, use your reason in everything in life. And if you do so, you will be successful. If we teach them that, victimhood will go away. But we're teaching the opposite, and therefore victimhood has to be the outcome. There is no other outcome possible.
So we have this massive rise of state power, free markets waning. And I've seen you make the comments about this, and I'm going to let you run with it. But one of the biggest victims in the rise of this state power, the ambitious poor, the people that want to strive, that want to make things happen. And maybe you can use a really concrete example with something that the average person might not think about the depth of, which is the minimum wage. And I'd really love for you to kind of walk that through and how it's so problematic.
Sure. So first, I think statism, the victims of statism are anybody who's ambitious, anybody who wants to succeed in life, anybody who wants to move forward. And whether you're poor, middle class, or rich, statism, inhibits you, it restricts you, it places barriers on you. And if you are ambitious, you are the victim here. And of course, if you are poor, you're starting out with fewer opportunities. It's harder for you to be successful. It requires more effort. That's just a fact of reality. And therefore, you need more freedom. You need more, if you will, opportunities in terms of a growing economy, a unregulated field in which you can start a business, be successful, get a job, work hard, get to keep what you earn, because you don't have, in a sense, capital put aside. You don't have any reserves to you. What you make in a living, what you make in a job, your success in the future, that's all you have. That's all you're going to have. So to the extent that we limit that, to the extent that you constrain that, you're the victim of those constraints. So take the minimum wage. I mean, the minimum wage restricts people of ambition across the entire spectrum. So let's start with the fact that let's think about what the minimum wage is. First of all, the minimum wage is the government was telling us that what two individuals negotiate as the price, in this case, the price for their labor, is, the government doesn't approve of it. The government says, if you negotiated $5 an hour with somebody, we, the government, think that's wrong, and we are going to step in and say, no, In California now, it has to be 10. So first of all, the government is replacing its judgment for the judgment of two people, right? The entrepreneur who's hiring and the worker who is agreeing to be hired at $5 an hour. And the government's saying our judgment is more important than your judgment. That's a huge violation of rights. That is a huge intervention in the lives of individuals who have the capacity to make their own decisions about their own life. Now, who suffers? Both parties suffer. The entrepreneur suffers because he can't hire somebody at $5. And therefore his cost of labor is now doubled from $5 to $10. He has to hire them at $10 instead of at $5. He's going to hire a different person at 10 than he would at 5 because at $10 he has to hire somebody who's a lot more productive. It's going to be harder to find that person. The person at 10 is going to force him to raise prices on his goods so everything in his store is going to increase. It's going to make it much harder for him to compete. And indeed, this entrepreneur might never start his business because at $10 an hour, he can't make any money. And therefore, he'll never start the business and never start. Now, there are other options. He might hire somebody at $10 an hour and raise prices. So a lot of times, these are businesses that serve, let's say, that are selling stuff to poor people. Prices have gone up. Poor people are now suffering. Other people are suffering. So another option is he's facing $10 an hour. He says, you know what? I can probably build a machine to do the work for less than $10 an hour. So I'm not going to hire anybody. And now nobody gets hired at any salary because a machine is brought in to replace the worker. Now, so the entrepreneur is clearly a victim because his profits are lower. He has to raise prices. And in some cases, he won't even start the business. That is, the business won't start. And therefore, let's say he's a young, maybe even is a poor person who's got a loan from a bank to start a business. Now he's not even going to start the business because the business doesn't make any sense if he has to pay his workers $10 an hour. Now, what about the kid who agreed to work for $5 an hour? Well, nobody's going to hire him at $10 an hour because he's probably not worth it. In other words, he can't produce at $10 an hour. So somebody who's going to be paid $5 an hour has to be able to produce slightly more than that. So let's say this kid can produce at $6 an hour. He's being paid $5 an hour. The $1 difference is the profit of the employer. By the way, for all of you listeners, if you get a salary from somebody, they're making a profit off of you. They're paying, it's a trade, right? They're benefiting from your work. You're benefiting because they're paying you more than your hour is worth to you. At $5 an hour, the kid is benefiting because his time is worth less than $5 an hour. And the employer is benefiting because he's producing it more than $5 an hour. That's how you negotiate. So this kid is never going to be employed now because at $10 an hour, he can never find a job because he can't produce at $10 an hour. So what is the consequence of that? This kid is never going to have a job. Now think of what would have happened if he'd worked at $5 an hour. If he'd worked at $5 an hour, he would have learned a skill. He would have learned to show up on time. He would have learned to produce something, to create something. He would have got better at it. He would have ultimately made $6 an hour, $10 an hour, maybe $100 an hour. Maybe he one day would be the entrepreneur who starts the business. But by stopping him right at the beginning, by stopping him from making $5 an hour, we've basically destroyed this kid's life. We've made it impossible for him to ever get a job. We've made it impossible for him to ever make a living and ever be an entrepreneur one day or ever make enough money to support himself and a family one day. We basically made him a real victim and made him a dependent on the state. Now he's a dependent on our charity. We could have just let him get a job, but no, we'd feel guilty about him getting only $5 an hour. So instead, we're going to make him dependent on welfare, on basically the state, instead of actually earning his own living. He'll never get self-esteem because he'll never have a job. He'll never achieve anything and he'll never be happy. We've institutionalized him into misery and poverty. And of course, the left always presents the minimum wage as we want to help the poor. No, what they're doing is they're destroying the poor. They're helping some people. There's some people at the margin that make a little bit, that are making a little bit more money, because the minimum wage has gone up. Some unions whose salary is linked to the minimum wage. Some employees who are maybe a little bit more senior who cannot get bumped up to the new $10 an hour. But the people who are starting out are all victims of this. And of course, the entrepreneur is victim of this. And at the end of the day, the entire economy, all of us are victims of this kind of regulation.
Yeah, two quick thoughts. I've seen this naturally happening in young people in their 20s and their early 30s, the concept of free work. So very smart guys and gals who want to get ahead are learning to go to the entrepreneurs and say, I don't even want a salary. I just want to do free work for you. I want to get exposed to your thinking. Let me learn. And it's completely outside of the state-run system where they're smart enough to know that this nonsense, let me just go straight to the people that I can learn something useful from. And heck, I don't even care about getting paid because I just want the skill.
Absolutely. I mean, people are willing to work for nothing under certain circumstances, and, to learn a skill, to learn ability. This is what internships are for. Yeah. And of course, they're deprived of that because of minimum wage, because of labor laws, because of all these constraints that are being put, because of all these problems that are being created.
I'll add one more thought to the minimum wage. I think it's all about votes, because if you can convince a certain segment of the population about the evil capitalists out there, the greedy capitalists, and they don't want to support the minimum wage, it's simply a way to get votes for a particular political class.
But why do people buy into it? That is, why do people vote for it? Why does the middle class vote for it when the middle class, when it so obviously hurts the people that it's supposed to be helping? And I think that is because of this morality of altruism. It's because, it doesn't matter what the actual results are. What matters is the intent, and the fact that we're sacrificing some poor kids and we're sacrificing some businessmen for the sake of some bigger purpose. They're okay with that. Sacrifice to them is noble. It's good. It isn't a negative thing to have people sacrificed.
Yeah, it's sadistic to me.
It really is. It's sick. But this is the morality that really is entrenched in our culture in dramatic, in really, significant way.
Let me jump to slightly different subject. So in the last 20 years, from my perspective, I've seen central bank misuse of interest rates that is essentially we keep creating bubbles and popping bubbles, creating bubbles and popping bubbles. And for the longest time, we had a chairman of the Federal Reserve who was once an acolyte of Ayn Rand. And for the longest time, he was praised. And then when the bubbles started popping, he has lost his entire reputation in the last 5-10 years. This would be Alan Greenspan. And what I find is unusual is that the media uses Alan Greenspan's work at the Federal Reserve, which I disagree with, as a tool to it's like, okay, he's the engineer of these bubbles. He was an acolyte of Ayn Rand. Therefore, Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead are useless. Okay, case closed.
Well, this is the standard practice. I mean, create straw men and pull them down. One of the features is they don't want to challenge the ideas. They don't want to actually engage in a discussion about the actual ideas that are involved with Ayn Rand. So they find different ways to smear her. And one of the ways to do that is to take Alan Greenspan, who clearly betrayed Ayn Rand's ideas on a massive scale, who clearly is not an acolyte of hers anymore, even though he was strongly associated with her in the 60s and 70s, and through him to smear her. But of course, this is the same media that for decades, a couple of decades, worshipped Alan Greenspan, and he couldn't do any wrong. And they pursued him, and they called him the maestro, and they threw accolades at him. If anything, they're far more guilty at building up Alan Greenspan than Ayn Rand ever was, and they're responsible for the disasters. They never saw it coming. They never called it. They never criticized him. Indeed, it was us, those of us who are fans of Ayn Rand, who understand her philosophy, who've claimed all along that Alan Greenspan is betrayed and is a bad guy, and that his economic policies are an absolute disaster. It's not them that have advocated for that. So they're the ones who are responsible. But this is the pattern. The pattern is not to engage with the actual ideas, not to engage in what the real issues are, but to smear her in any way that they can.
I've been thinking about this a lot. I just spent 4 days in Singapore. And Singapore is not perfect, but it's damn impressive. And I've had some friends say to me, because I'm currently in Vietnam tonight as I'm talking to you, and I've had some friends say to me, well, Michael, you're outside of the U.S. You're an American citizen. You can't be offering criticism of the USA. But when I go to Singapore, I see something that I don't think we are ever going to do in America. In my heart of hearts, in my gut, I'm seeing a form of capitalism that there's no reason we can't do it. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination trying to say the political system in Singapore is perfect or everything's perfect there. But when you set foot there, you just go, wow, 25, 30 years, 40 years, they did this. And in the same time frame, we haven't. And so I'm laying that out, and I'll let you comment on that. But where I'm ultimately going is the metaphorical Galt's Gulch, and whether that's a fixed geographic location or more a place where people nomadically move to and from. But I'm seeing this amongst friends and other entrepreneurs, this idea of truly reaching that point of looking to get away from the system, to be free, to have more freedom. What do you think about Singapore? What do you think about this idea of perhaps a Galt's Gulch actually coming into existence in some way or another?
Well, I mean, I think it would be fantastic and great. I find it hard to believe that it will actually happen. I mean, Singapore is wonderful, but as you said, it's got real problems. It's also got problems. It's fantastic in terms of certain economic freedoms, but it's also got heavy restrictions on other aspects of one's life, which are also important. And Galt's Gulch would be truly free. It would be free both from, in every aspect of our lives. But look, Singapore's done amazing things. So has Hong Kong. And we were there 100 years ago. I mean, we invented freedom, this country, America did. The founding fathers of this country invented this system of government, and it invented this idea of capitalism and individual rights and freedom. And we've turned our back on it. And to me, it's ridiculous to say you're outside of the country so you can't criticize it. That's a form of bizarre nationalism that is nuts. You should be able to criticize anybody from anywhere as long as you're doing it rationally and with sense. I think those of us who care about America want to see us move towards more economic freedom, which means more of the economic model that is Hong Kong and Singapore. Now, again, those economic models are flawed, but they're better than what we have in the U.S. today. I also think that the problem is that I'm doubtful whether Singapore and Hong Kong could exist without the United States. That is, I still think that the U.S. is a model for people, at least as an ideal, or in its founding. If the U.S. somehow collapses, I don't see Singapore and Hong Kong surviving that collapse. So I'm not convinced yet that there truly is somewhere to escape to, that there truly is somewhere that you could escape. So I, for one, am committed to fighting, to make the United States a better place, and hopefully, to exceed even the amount of freedom and the amount of prosperity that exists in Hong Kong and Singapore. But I agree with you. When I go to, I haven't been to Singapore, but I can talk about Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong's an exciting, vibrant, dynamic place. And that kind of excitement and that kind of energy and that kind of sense of production and growth and success, you don't get that in America anymore. I think it used to be here. I think it can be here again. You get glimpses of it when you go to a place like San Francisco and the Silicon Valley, and people are energized and creating stuff and building stuff. But to really have that become again part of the national character of America, it means dramatic changes to our political system, dramatic changes towards freedom. And hopefully it's not too late to make those dramatic changes. But I know lots of people who are looking for some way to escape. I'm just not convinced there is any way to escape to. Singapore might be nice for a while, but I'm not sure it's gold. It's certainly not Gold's Gulch, put it that way.
Well, that was my question I was going to ask you. One quick follow-up question here we'll as we wrap up. But you have that optimism that America can turn the corner and get back to certain ideals. I'm guessing, though, that you must have friends and associates that you respect who think it's past the point of no return.
Well, yes, I do. And, even I am not, optimism is a strong word. I mean, even I think the probability of failure far exceeds the probability of success. I just don't see what the option is. That is, I truly believe that if America fails, there will be no place on earth to hide. There will be no place that will be safe from the statists, from the barbarians, if you will. So the battle is here, and it will be won or lost here. And the probability of losing is very, very high. But, what option do we have? That's the way I perceive it. So, and there's another approach that some of my friends have, and that is, let's say the United States has collapsed and things do get much, much worse. People are then going to be looking for answers. We saw a little bit of that after 2008 when sales of Atlas Shrugged went through the roof. People are going to be looking for answers. Typically in history, after a collapse, authoritarianism rises. Some strong man takes control. What if, when the next collapse happens, people, because we have done our job, because Ayn Rand's ideas have been out there in the culture, because the books have sold, people now have available to them, in front of them, an option. Authoritarianism, strongman on one hand, freedom, Gold's Gulch on the other hand. Doesn't it increase the probability, if we do our job now, doesn't it increase the probability that when the collapse happens, we rebound out of it into a freer society? Never happened in human history, but we've never had these ideas so strongly presented in human history and so strongly advocated for and fought for in human history. So there are lots of reasons, in my view, to fight. And again, if you could show me a place where my life would be substantially better and they could survive whatever happened elsewhere in the world, then great. I mean, a lot of people should move to Gold's Gulch, but I just don't see it. I don't see it anywhere.
Yaron, I appreciate your time today. One last thought I want to add. I'm sorry I keep holding you on here, but you got some great insights. Venezuela, I saw recently, they put price controls, okay? So basically the local Best Buy can only sell a TV and make so much profit. And the first thing I said to myself was, there is 51% plus in America that would support that right now. Am I crazy?
Well, Richard Nixon put on price controls in the 1970s. And it was quite popular at the time. There was inflation, and he thought price controls were the way to stop it. And of course, it was a complete and utter disaster, and he had to withdraw the price controls pretty quickly. But it's happened in America, and it could happen again.
Yaron, what's the best place for people to reach out and find out more, read your writings, connect with you? I know you're on Forbes, right? Where else?
Forbes, if you look for me on Forbes, you can find my columns. Facebook, Yaron Brook, YARON BROOK on Facebook, Twitter, and of course, AynRand.org, AYNRAND.org.
Hopefully, we will have some really compelling, interesting stuff happen in the next 6 months to a year, and you and I can circle back and compare notes.
Almost guarantee that will happen. Sounds good.
Thanks, Yaron. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.